Three, two, one.
Hello, welcome back to the Godfo Universe podcast. I'm Josh Adams, co-creator of the Godfo Universe. I'm here with Dan Evans, as usual, other creator of the Godfo Universe. Uh, Comic books, novels, video games, short films, albums
Operas.
of music, all kinds of stuff in this world that we're creating, and a lot of it's about to start coming out this next part of the year. So as summer's kind of coming to a close, we're getting a lot of things finished that we've been working on. So very soon we'll be releasing some awesome stuff. So be looking out for some pre-order links, things like that in the really near future. So Dan, have you had a good weekend?
Man,
It's always a loaded question to ask a married man if he's had a good weekend.
yeah, it's like, well, you had a weekend.
He's like, I'm alive.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to hang out with one of my kids all day today, so that was fun. But
Very cool.
I just want to work on cool stuff and not do. I got to talk to Stephen Crowley a good bit.
Nice.
And for people who don't know yet, he's been on here a few times. Great guy. But
Yeah, I got to get him on the Nuggets Bible Study podcast soon too. I'd love to have him on there.
yeah, he's great.
He's a good one to talk to.
We'll have him back on for Lord of the Rings and some other stuff, but I'm making that album with him. And
Yeah.
I mean, if you guys stick around, you'll get to hear Steven play guitar, and it'll blow your mind. He's probably the best guitar player I've ever met. Maybe the best musician.
He's definitely
I've
one
ever
of the
met.
best, just like natural talents with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's incredibly intuitive guitarist, and like, I don't know, he's got good chemistry with other musicians, which a lot of times guitarists don't. So,
Yeah,
like, that's what I always admired about him. Whenever y'all played in bands together, is like he knew how to synergize with everybody else. A lot of times guitarists like to just jump out in front of the mix and
well, he's an artist.
show off.
That's the
Yeah,
difference. He's an actual artist and
yeah,
a musician. He's not just some guy that plays guitar or some guy on YouTube or Instagram that can shred, but it just doesn't sound good. Like, he's actually musical. He actually writes things you can sing,
right.
and he can shred. So he's
All right,
he's
so
the best of both worlds.
let's get off of that tangent and get on what we're here for today.
Bad
Dan,
art.
why don't you go? Why don't you go ahead and introduce our topic today? Because this was kind of your idea, and I'm looking forward to it. But I want you to go ahead and kind of give us an idea of what we're talking about and why it's worth talking about.
All right, so Angel slash Archangel is my favorite X-Men character. I remember as a kid, you know, when like the Archangel like transition happened. It was a little before me, but I remember like that was a pivotal thing. Like when I got into comics, and I remember seeing it in the cartoon and all that. And he was the coolest designed thing I've ever seen ever.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really beat like huge bladed metal wings, you know, and that
Well, and the
purple and
color
pink
scheme,
suit,
yeah.
beautiful, and blue skin, and just perfect. So I was not rereading. I was reading Uncanny X Force, the Remember, or I don't know how to say his name. Remender, the Remender run, and I love the design. I love the way that the characters are, like especially the suits. Great,
Mm-hmm.
the silver and black and the pink and the purple, and
Mm-hmm.
you know in this run, Warren Archangel he's the head of X Force, which kind of gives it some legitimacy, even though it's off the books, because he actually has a conscience.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I'm not going to go into all that. But I like the run,
And a lot of
yeah,
that, just to chime in, a lot of that has to do with Rick Remender as a writer, but he's
yeah,
written some of the greatest comic books of all time.
yeah,
Like he wrote Tokyo Ghost, which is my favorite comic. So like anything Rick touches, I'm gonna like,
yeah.
just
He has
because
a
he's a great
good
writer.
perspective on things. It's he goes a little. I'm skipping all that. I'd recommend it so far.
Yeah.
But the art, at least after volume one, isn't great. And maybe it gets
Mm-hmm.
better in some. But anyway, I was looking up. I just happened to search like Archangel versus Wolverine fight, because I remember them fighting in like the '80s, and Archangel beat the absolute crap out of him. And I loved it. I like Wolverine, but I like seeing him lose.
Hmm.
That's what I'll never
Getting
forget.
brought down a
I
peg.
remember when Omega Red was created. I have that issue up here. It's one of my favorite
Yep.
issues ever. Omega Red wore him out for 18 hours and was just playing with him. But the art. So I searched that. I searched Archangel versus Wolverine, and both of the art came up from Uncanny X Force and then the run from the 80s. And the art is just so drastic, it's sad. They're so drastically
Hmm.
different. So I showed it to you, and this is something, and this isn't new art. That's what's so strange, but it's just gotten worse since this. So I'm gonna pull it up, and I don't think you can see it, but you know what I'm talking about.
I know the
So
ones we're yeah, I know the ones
yeah,
we're talking about.
so the 2 pages of Wolverine jumping forward. On the left
Hmm.
is the old run. Obviously, on the left is the right. On the right is the new one. There's just I'm going to say this from a non-artist perspective, just from a fan. And the main thing is I want your perspective. But
Hmm.
on the left, the old version, it's just so much more vibrant in 3D. The way they did it, you've got Wolverine crossing the border of the second panel. When I look at
Hmm.
this left page, I don't even see lines or panels. I just see a work of
Hmm.
art. On the
Yep.
right, the new one, it's just 4 boxes. Um,
Hmm.
on the left side, the colors are just natural colors that blend in well. On the right, the new one, it's like everything's shiny for some reason. Um, the there's more dialogue in the old one, the left one, and it doesn't feel like it. And on the right one, there's less dialogue, but there's less room. It's the right one just
Hmm.
feels so claustrophobic. And on the left, they didn't really do backgrounds because they were kind of inspired from older comics and from manga too, where there was kind of like just action lines and stuff. But it
Hmm.
looks so much better. But the backgrounds on the new one don't look any better. They look worse. And
Yeah.
I think the lighting is just I don't like I said I'm not an artist, but the modern lighting and color in comics is just so bad.
Hmm.
It's just I don't know what to say. It looks super flat, super sterile. I don't know. I can see when I look at the left picture, I can see everything instantly, and then I can zoom in and appreciate all the detail. On the right, it's like it just hurts my eyes to look at.
All right. So before we dive deeper into,
And this is just
kind of
an example. I picked this because it was the same fight. Yeah,
right, before we dig deeper into that, can you pull up? I had a second page of each of those fights I sent you,
yeah. I'll pull those up
and
as well.
yeah, I think the second page goes even further in kind of demonstrating the intensity of one over the other. Um, and once you when you look at these two and you see, part of it is, yeah, there even in the second page of the Jim Lee, because the older artwork is Jim Lee, who is of course an absolute master.
Yeah,
Jim Lee
untouchable.
penciled, yeah, he penciled that. So the layout would be his. All the figures, most of the, at least initially, like the lighting of where the shadows, all that stuff would have been his. And he has got a very cinematic approach, and there's always a lot of movement and a lot of action. Like you said, in the first picture, we have Logan at the top breaking completely out of that frame and overlapping the panel below him with both his knee and the claws.
Mm-hmm.
And then even in the second one, we have some of the dialogue that Archangel's screaming, crossing over from one panel into the other. Whereas in the modern comics, there is, for some reason, we've gotten a lot more constrained to the boxes and panels. So
It's
I would
yeah,
agree that that's part of what makes it feel claustrophobic. Another part of it is it's so it's so close quarters. It feels like it, particularly on that second page of
yeah,
the more recent fight of the Uncanny X Force fight.
yeah,
It seems like it's almost like if it was a camera, it's zoomed in too close.
yeah.
And I think a lot of it does come down to uh, the influence of cinematography on artists. and storyboarding on artists is if you look at older movies from the 70s, from the 80s, you usually had a lot more with your action sequences, action scenes. You could see the stunts, you could see the fight choreography. The cameras were usually set back enough that you could see what was happening, and you had longer shots. Whereas in more modern, really starting in the late 90s, early 2000s, more modern action movies, camera angles in fight scenes are zoomed way in close,
Shaky.
and shaky cam, and it's all like quick edits. It
Yeah,
started
that's
even
what's
with
so
movies like,
terrible.
right, even movies that I like a lot that had some cool fight scenes. Movies like Blade was one of the ones that first started doing some of those really quick edits and stuff to
And
where
a
it
lot, a
was
lot of that was to make like superhuman speed.
right.
Yeah.
And then I think a lot of others, like action cinematographers, maybe learned the wrong lessons from movies like that. Because by the time you get to movies like The Transporter and the Fast and the Furious movies and stuff like that, everything is cut together so fast.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to even know what's happening in a fight.
Yeah.
It's all just zoomed in
It's just to
and moves
confuse
so
you.
fast. Right. And, that's one of the things that I loved about the John Wick movies is they actually kind of pulled back.
They look like old samurai movies.
Right. They brought it back to actually having a really wide angle view of a whole scene and seeing every piece of it come together and be well orchestrated.
It moves with him and centers him.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that that's part of what's going on here is just there's a close-up claustrophobic sense of, and quick edit type stuff to where it doesn't 100% flow. So like in that second page of the X-Force,
yeah,
the top panel, we've got Warren shooting all those blades at Logan. The very next panel doesn't make sense because he just shot all those at Logan. You should see Logan in front of him.
Yeah, unless he's to his left, which is really weird.
Which even if he was, then we see in these other angles, like they made such an effort to put in, let's put in wallpaper and let's put in the bed in the background and this turned over chair and all these details, but
that are boring details.
Yeah, it's boring details instead of showing, what Logan's back there with a bunch of blades stuck in him, and then by the time he does come back into the picture. It's, I don't know. It just feels like that quick editing stuff that you see in movies, and that's the best way I know how to describe it.
Yeah, and it seems like the top panel isn't bad if you completely redid it. Had a Archangel top right kind of angle and the Logan bottom left. Make a more dynamic shot. And then
even this angle would work better if it wasn't so tight.
Yeah.
And if some of like he created some cool perspective with the blades coming at us. If he had let those break out of the panel, it would have been so much
exactly.
more
Instead of cutting off, you cut off the sharp point.
Right.
They don't look intimidating. And and then the shot after that is it should have been, I'm sorry, Logan, God, and then the second panel, there is too much at stake, you'll understand soon. He should have been saying that in the bottom of the top panel. The next panel should have been where it says rich kid, pretty boy. They should have zoomed in on the guy that's getting shot at there, his face terrified, like horrific. Yeah. Because he just looks bored right there, and then you could have made the comparison between this guy that's getting hurt and Wolverine calling Warren a rich kid. So anyway,
well, and see, you also
little things like that.
And if you go back to the Jim Lee page, we actually see like intensity in their facial expressions. We see a lot of detail, and part of what we need to do to really unpack why one is better than the other is we can't look at modern comics or big studio comics without realizing like these are team projects.
Yeah.
So the artwork you got, Jim Lee is doing the the pencils, but then you've also got other people working on that book too. So Jim draws the pencils. You got a guy named Scott Williams that's the inker, and then you actually had two different colorists working on that book back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And all of those people can either add to and elevate or bury the excellent work that Jim did in the pencils.
Mm-hmm.
So like you look at Jim Lee and he's one of the best
Ever.
Yeah, he just simply is that good. And he has never phoned anything in his life. Like every book, everything he's ever done, the anatomy has been fantastic. The dynamic poses has been fantastic. He always puts just the right amount of detail. He's great with lighting. He always has really good dynamic lighting, shadows and hatching and cross hatching, all that stuff. It's always going to be fantastic when you see Jim do it, which means because Jim Lee's pencils are not like sparse. Some pencilers are don't go very heavy on the hatching and the cross hatching and all those the detail work and stuff. So some pencilers are very laid back with their approach. They're very simplistic. And others like Jim, they go in and they do a lot of shading with their pencils. And if you take a heavy-handed inker and put them on top of somebody like Jim's work, all that pencil work gets buried.
Yeah.
Now, I sent you some other artwork, and the first thing I sent you was some ink work that was done by Scott Williams, who's the same inker that worked on that issue of Uncanny X-Men. So it's the Superman and Batman picture. There's a Superman bursting through some rocks. Then there's also a Wolverine fighting the Silver Samurai cover that he had inked.
All right.
If we can look at a few of those.
I've got Batman and Superman up. Give me a second.
Okay.
I've got Superman. You can always tell Jim Lee's faces too because he knows how to draw men.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he knows how to draw women too.
Oh yeah.
He understands anatomy very well, especially faces.
Right.
He knows masculinity and femininity, which, like, that's something that's another reason I stopped reading X-Men was when they launched the new X-Men or whatever, which had great writing for the most part. Some of it was kind of pretentious. Like, Wolverine was such a pretty boy with big pouty lips for some reason.
Yeah, it's so weird.
And, like, they started giving I'm not trying to go off on tangent, but they started giving everybody, like, weird lips for a while there. Like, I don't know. It was I don't know if it was the same artist or what, but let me pull up this last one. That's Dr. Doom.
All right, hold off on the Dr. Doom. That's a different guy.
Okay.
All right, so the Superman and Batman, Superman where he's kind of bursting through these rocks, and then that Uncanny X-Men cover of Wolverine fighting the Silver Samurai. All three of those examples are where Scott has inked a Jim Lee pencil.
Yeah.
All right, so you can see that the two of those guys work together like a finely oiled machine. He didn't he never buries any of Jim Lee's line work.
Yeah.
Like you can tell he's somebody who went in with a really like a small nib, or a really tiny brush for his line work and was able to capture all that hatching and cross hatching that Jim Lee does to layer in all those different shadows. Like on Batman's arm, there's so many good, perfectly, like just enough to show you the muscle definition in his forearms and his bicep.
Yeah.
They're on that knee, on his hand that's out, the knuckles, and all those little pieces of really fun stuff on the front of his hand. Jim Lee was such a master at that. And then we still got some really heavy shadows in that Superman and Batman scene.
Mm-hmm.
But none of the line work gets buried. All three of those examples, like where there's dark shadows and fully black scenes, he definitely does that. But like that Wolverine cover,
yeah,
he's got all of those little details, all of the hair and all those lines, and none of it's too heavy-handed.
Nah.
So what we come away with is that that's an inker who lets that artist who penciled the book shine.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, I was wondering initially. I'm like, okay, so if it's not the ink or the pencils that are the problem, maybe it's the ink with that other picture. So I wanted to see what does it look like when this Rich Elson guy does inks.
This is the Doctor
And
Doom.
yeah, so when you pull up the Doctor Doom, and this was an example of his inks, and to be perfectly honest, that's a great page. It's dynamic. It's got good shadows. It's got some really good line work. He knows when to pull back. So I can't blame the problem on the inking
Yeah.
in the more recent thing, because he's a really solid inker. Um, and I wouldn't even say that the pencil is bad. Uh, the problem is not that is not the ink, and apart from the fact that it's not laid out very dramatically,
Mm-hmm.
and you can tell that it was laid out on a computer and not on paper.
You
First,
talking
it
about
feels
you?
that
You still
way.
talking about Doom?
Well, right now I'm actually back on
Okay, that's what I
the
was. That's what I was thinking.
X Force.
Because
Sorry, it's
Doom,
hard for
because
me.
Doom looks good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Doom. Well, I mean, you can clearly see that one was
Yeah.
done on paper.
Well, it's
Um,
also got that old school. I hate to say this because I'm just so ignorant, but it's got that 70s, early 80s, what I call Cerebus style, which is those big blocks, like the
mhm.
two rectangles, which I like that. That's how Matt Wagner did some of that Demon run, and some of not Grendel, but some of that Demon run he did was like that big kind of
Right.
block
Well,
style.
and that's one of the things I do a good bit in Apollyon is I'll basically treat the bottom and
Yeah,
background of the page like a splash page,
yeah,
and then you've got a few other smaller panels on top of it, but not in a way that takes away from the background. So I'm sitting here thinking, what is it that doesn't work about the X Force version of this fight? And I think that, and I'll call him out on it. I don't care. I looked him up. He looks like if you bought Kevin Sorbo off of Wish.com. The colorist is a guy named Paul Mounts, and that did the Rick Remender stuff. So you got an artist, penciler, and inker are Billy Tan, Rich Elson. I don't really think they're the problem here. I sent you some pictures that are full color. These are some examples. I sent you three. These are examples of coloring by Paul Mount or Paul Mounts. However you say his name.
give me a
I don't
second.
care. So the three full color
this is the
pictures.
Shang-Chi.
Yep, there's a Shang-Chi, and some other like Marvel, Galactus and stuff like
Ooh,
that over on the right.
yeah.
As a Squirrel Girl picture. There's one of the Thing, and then there's an older one from the 90s or early 2000s of Strong Guy.
I don't know if I get. I don't think I can open the Thing one for some reason. Give me a second.
I can resend it if I
Yeah,
need to.
resend it.
All right, I just sent it to you.
Yeah, well, this art's not very good. To be honest, the Squirrel Girl, the new Squirrel Girl has never had good art ever. So, that Thing one's still not going through, man. Just don't worry about it.
All right, that's fine. If anybody wants to kind of see, I know it's not going to be the easiest thing to see, but
Hold on, let me move the pictures. Yeah, okay.
So what you'll see with Paul Mounts is his colors, especially go to the Strong Guy one.
Yeah, I got it up.
His colors are ridiculously oversaturated for one thing.
Yeah, yeah.
There's nothing natural or realistic about his skin tones.
It looks like it was drawn and then scanned into a bad like '90s scanner. Remember how it used to mess up colors?
Yeah, it's his. I don't know if he used markers or if he used watercolor or what, but very, very saturated artwork, color wise.
Yeah.
His colors absolutely bury any
Everything.
of the good line and ink details.
Yeah, I think you're an artist. I think you're right. Especially like this, the Squirrel Girl one is just so awful. Like
Yeah, there's nothing.
it's
There's
so
not a
flat.
natural color. Yeah, there's not a natural color anywhere in that.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard for my
And
eyes to see, like to adjust to.
yeah, there's no depth to it. It's like looking at one of those pictures, those 3D pictures where your
Exactly.
eyes cross and
Yeah.
you hope something will come out of it. Yeah, there's no atmospheric perspective. There's no like it's just buried in color. And then one of the things you'll notice, and again, I'm gonna kind of go in the same spot that I was at before. If you look at just that wine glass, it's got 3 or 4 different spots where he's put in these little Photoshop lens flares.
Yeah.
It's got like
Like he's J.J.
all
Abrams.
this ridiculous. Yeah, it's just overdone, and almost everything has a lens flare on it. The rings on the thing's hand have ring flares on them. Like there's little lens flares on
Everything's
everything.
shiny. Everything's shiny.
Yes, and you see that if we pull back up that first page of the Wolverine Archangel fight,
Let me give you a second.
Wolverine's his shoulders are shiny and have little dots of shiny light on them. His gloves are shiny and have
Yeah.
little fake, photoshopped in shiny light on him. If you look at
And the light
Archangel's
source is
wing,
behind him.
yeah,
That's
for
what
some
that's what's
reason,
well that's what's weird is that they're shining on his. It looks like there's
yeah,
2 lights on his shoulders, but the light source is behind him.
yeah,
But then there's another one
uh,
on his biceps. It's like there's 7
yeah,
light sources.
yeah, and then we get that for the wings.
Yeah.
All of the wings have this just a gradient that was dragged in. It doesn't look realistic, and it's even worse on the second page. If you look at the second page from that fight, uh, we've got all these little everywhere he can find to put in some kind of gradient layer.
Yeah.
He does. In the second panel of it, when we see the back of Archangel and
Yeah.
he's saying there's too much at stake. Look at that right wing. There's a
Yeah.
red lens flare on the right wing. Why?
Yeah, that's weird.
Why? If we look at there's in the one where the dude is not as scared as he should be hiding behind the dresser. Every single one of those knives have red,
Man,
orange
I
looking
just
lens
I
flares.
just realized he's hiding behind it and not beside it because of how it's
Yeah,
drawn.
yeah, it's too close in. If they
Yeah.
had stepped back
Step
a little
back.
bit,
They should
it
have
would have made.
stepped back to make him look small and Archangel huge with the wings
Yeah, you
spread
should have
out.
seen Archangel should have probably even been visible in that,
Yeah.
like leering over him more.
And his wing blast should have split that desk in half. Should have obliterated it.
Yeah, it's
Sorry.
no, but you're right. And then look at the last panel. We've got another one of these
On his
ridiculous
head.
orange right on his head.
That's so weird.
And I don't know why any of that stuff is there. If the artist, if the pencil and the shading and the ink, if it's done right, you shouldn't have to go in and add a bunch of lens flares and fake. You can see he overlaid a wood texture over to try to make the desk look like a desk. I know you weren't able to look at it, but that picture of the thing, I'm gonna zoom in on it and see if y'all can see it on the camera. I want you to look at the scarf on that thing picture.
Oh, the 4s and the lines.
And literally all he did was like layer it on there with Photoshop. It looks
Oh,
terrible.
wow, he did. You're right.
It's just like layered on top of it as a Photoshop layer. And I think that's the biggest problem with this art is you look at something that's so dark and muddy and just oversaturated and not natural at all.
Well, and
And and it obscures the artwork. And then you look at that first picture we looked at from Jim Lee, and everything is so clear.
I got it pulled up.
All of that line work is nothing's buried.
It's just
even the silhouettes.
I've got both of the pictures pulled up. The first one of Wolverine lunging. Like,
Right.
guys, whoever's watching this, just look at the difference and realize those pages are the same size. Like, those are both standard comic page sizes, but Jim Lee's looks huge.
Yeah, it looks like a wall-sized poster.
Yeah, compared to the new one. And it's like it's almost like this is almost like a master class we're having here of comparing good versus bad art, because it's almost a play-by-play of this fight. It's just a worse for this is if they bought the fight off Wish.
Yeah, that's the sad thing. And you know, if you're listening to this and you're wanting to know, well, like what can I do to be a better artist? You know, for one thing, understand anatomy better. Because if you look at Wolverine in that Jim Lee drawing, look at the muscle definition in that
in
leg.
both of them, yeah,
and in his all the details and definition in his arms, and then you look at the new one, and we have this very shriveled little arm.
Man,
those Wolverine arms.
That's
like
what I
Hugh
noticed.
Jackman X-Men 1.
Let me pull this up. This is because I was reading this the other night, which like I said, I like this run for the most part.
Yeah, and I'm not hating on it. And the reality is there is some good stuff here. The shattered door with all the splinters, that's well done.
I think
that's really well done.
I think it's a little too dark. Oh, this is what I'm looking at. Let me move this real quick so I can see it. So maybe I'm being biased. I don't think I am, because Archangel is my favorite. But look at how look at this picture of him with Psylocke right here. Why would you draw someone like that? Look how goofy that is.
Yeah, it's there's nothing exciting or dynamic about
look
that
at his
position.
look at his body.
Yeah, it's weird.
But the whole it
looks like he just tripped over a stool.
Yeah, like compare it to like his first appearance when he takes out all of X Factor by himself. It's super strict, super. I mean, Warren has always been a lean guy, but he's been buff, like or ripped, I should say. Like, you know, Jim Lee drew him here. He's tall, but and I get that they're building up to the dark, like the dark Archangel arc in this when he gets taken over by Apocalypse, but he's such a weenie in everything so far. He's always like, look at this. You see how, dang it, I always keep doing that. Somehow Wolverine closes the gap between them here in page 1 and 2. That happens with everybody he fights. And this guy has like, what, a 16-foot wingspan or something ridiculous of razor sharp wings. Dude, and they're stronger than arms. Like, wings are unbelievably strong, especially if they're that size and metal. No one like Wolverine or Psylocke is getting in close to this dude.
Well, I mean, the argument, I guess, could be made that the only reason Wolverine would be able to get into him is because he can take the damage. But even,
I mean, like, physically, there's no way you're getting through it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, all he does is, like, deflect.
And smack him away. Right. Because Archangel, I think, has fought Sabretooth before to, like, a standstill. And I could be wrong, but I know the dude put down X Factor in his first appearance, and he took down Beast. Yeah, see,
look at that.
That's what I'm saying. Every pose he's always in like that is strong. But I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but yeah, like, how do you even draw Wolverine looking like a pansy? But they do. Anyway, it's...
Well, and, you know, I want to go back to this idea for a minute. Can you pull up the Jim Lee cover, the Omega Red cover that you were talking about, or bring it up so we can see
Yeah,
it.
give me just a second. I'll pull it up. It's on my wall, so I'll get it offline.
All right.
One of the greatest. Which, hey, another thing, praising Jim Lee. Jim Lee's probably the greatest comic book cover artist ever.
Oh yeah, hands down.
And he did so. I saw the one the other day. It was like number 28. It was it's when Gambit defeats Sabretooth, and he's just standing over him with the staff. And it's like if anyone else would have done that, they would have made it look terrible. And he did it so well. Let me pull this up.
All right, I want you to.
Oh my gosh, it's doing that thing where it saves it as a link instead of a.
I gotcha. I just sent you a recolored modern version of that same cover. I want you to look how much of a difference, how muddy and fake it looks with modern color.
All right.
Compared to the original.
Is it really going to do this? All right, whatever. Okay, so here's the original, guys. And let me pull up the new one. Oh, man, you're right. I didn't even pick up a good version of the old one.
Look how bad those colors are.
Yeah.
Look at how much muddy, how much it
bright. Yeah, it's so bright.
It buries the ink. It buries so much of that great line work. You've got those ridiculous red-looking lens flares on the claws. I mean, it's an absolute but somehow or another we're supposed to believe that version is superior somehow.
Yeah, it's like when they put too much compression in music, the dynamism is gone. Which we've talked about this before. Which I hate to say that I sound like a dick, but I've got that up, and I've got some of the the X-Force 1 and 2 I was talking about looking. These look like indie comics. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what
they
you
look
mean.
like they were made by guys who don't do this for a living. And I've seen some guys that clearly really like McFarlane, and sometimes their covers or their pitch photo will look good, but then you see the interiors and it looks like this or worse.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, come on.
And that really, it started in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Dude,
people got more dependent on the computer
let me interject there because it's on topic. Remember that really famous cover? It's when Archangel becomes Angel again, and he's like this, and he's blue, and he has like the normal wings. I hate that cover. I have hated that art style. That when I was a kid, I was like 9 or 10 years old when that came out. That's when I checked out of all because everything started looking like that. That's whenever you started seeing 97 in the top left of X-Men comics. That's when I was done with them.
Yep. But yeah, that was when they started doing so much of the colors digital, and it's like people realize, oh, I got all these things I can play with and put gradients and all this stuff, and they started burying the art underneath these layers of ridiculous colors.
Do you remember that artist so I can look it up properly?
I'm having
a lot of people love him. And hey, he's a better artist than me, but I remember seeing that and like me as a kid, it like broke my heart. I was like done. I was like, because I had like the issue I think before that, or maybe it was that one. It's the one where Psylocke finds that his wing has broken and become a feather again, and then I think they did that afterward. But
trying to find it.
Yeah, I can't know why I can't find it. It's a really famous cover because a lot of people like it, but I have always hated that guy's art style. But yeah, like this one, you can't see it. It was Uncanny X-Men. It's got Psylocke fighting Maggot, and their faces are just awful. It's Appetites for Destruction. Lobdell,
I'm
but
about to send it to you.
Lobdell and Bachalo,
Hmm.
one of them.
I'm about to send it to you and see if this is the one you're talking about.
It's got him. It's got his normal wings, but yeah, every other when they really did Archangel right, which I'm not trying to harp on him, but whatever. That's it. Angel Reborn. That's it. Look at
All
this,
right, so yeah,
guys. Yeah, I
That's Joe Madura.
dude, I did
He
not
got
like his art at all.
he got started with he got his big start with Age of Apocalypse.
That
He
explains
was
a lot because
he's
I loved that story, but I did not like the art for it.
he's heavily influenced by the manga style, but
In the wrong
I
way.
actually like it. Well, I like a lot of his work. I don't like the stuff he's done with X-Men.
Yeah.
I like the stuff he's got a series. It's like a fantasy series that recently just came out with a new issue, like after like a 10 something 12-year hiatus. I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's got a video game too that's really fun.
Anyway.
It doesn't matter, but yeah, Madura. But there again, if you look at I know you don't necessarily like his style because he's a more, I guess, a more exaggerated
Yeah. No.
style. But
But just I'm
his
not trying.
pencils and
I'm not trying to be a jerk, man. But you were there, like as a kid. You go from Jim Lee to that.
right,
It's just a let. Sorry.
yeah, I get you. Battle Chasers is what I was trying to think of. But if you look at his art before it's colored, like his inks and stuff are fantastic.
Or you say you're going back
Like
to maybe it's the colors again.
I feel like a lot of it's the colors. He's not a bad artist. He's not a bad drawer.
Have you
I
got
can send you
have
a
you got
couple
a
of
have you got a black
examples.
you got a black and white of that cover?
Let me see.
But anyway, yeah, I'm not trying to down people, man, but like so much from and we just gotta address it, especially in indie, because a lot of people that also talk about how bad like modern comics are make stuff that looks like this. Like
Yeah.
I just
Well, and
I
I
can't
think
get
that the
over it.
biggest thing to pull from it, I think, is I'm gonna send you this. I think the biggest thing to pull from it is you got to think, like, I know that what's happening in comics is not the real world, but there's got to be something about the colors that feel natural.
Yeah.
Like you can't so oversaturate and you can't drown the line work and the pencil work underneath all these heavy dark colors. And I don't think you're doing anybody favors by going in and throwing in a bunch of ridiculous lens flares and stuff that and making things shiny that shouldn't be.
Well, so much stuff is just here, I'll share it. I don't care anymore. Can I share my screen? All right. So you see us right there?
Yeah.
All right. So this is a I'm not trying to cast shade here because the dude's talented, but can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So it's just one. It's just kind of famous, like Reaper Destroyer. It caught my attention because it's clearly like a McFarlane inspired thing, and I love McFarlane. So whoever did that cover is good. That's a good cover.
Oh yeah.
This isn't bad. I just say that isn't bad. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. This is cool. If you're like a fan of the '90s, this looks kind of like who's the guy that did Soulfire and Witchblade?
Silvestri.
Yeah,
Mark Silvestri.
yeah. I mean, it's not Silvestri, but it's that style, especially the female face.
It clearly is definitely like
Yeah.
drawing from that influence.
This is a pretty good cover, but like, see that there's that lens flare again, and here, like, that's just weird colors. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to cast shade here because this guy's doing way better than I am. It's just I'm not like, here's more of the lens flare, and everything just feels very flat. Like if McFarlane had done this would be super in depth back here. More flare. There's lens flare, which I never noticed that till you pointed it out. But like, look how flat this picture this is. Like this light back here doesn't help
Well,
anything.
see, and the thing is, you're never going to be able to unsee it now.
Yeah, but like I'm not trying to be mean again, but
But no,
like
that's why,
this is super flat.
and and that's why I think it comes down, if you're not going to draw, draw it, ink it, and color it yourself, if that's not what you're able to do,
Yeah,
that if you're going to work with somebody, like you can't give your colors to just anybody. You can't give your inks to just anybody.
yeah,
Like there was actually a pretty big stink, and I think this is part of why Jack Kirby, if I remember correctly, part of why Jack Kirby left Marvel back in the day was because they had multiple people that would do the inks for a Jack Kirby book,
yeah.
and there were guys that did a really good job of it. And there was one guy, and I can't remember his name right now, but there was one guy working for Marvel. He worked for DC and some other, he was freelance back then. Most of you guys were freelance. And they would bring him in a lot of times to ink Jack Kirby because Kirby was working on multiple books and they just wanted to get him out on time.
Yeah.
And this guy could hit deadlines. But like when he would ink, Kirby would have like these like incredibly detailed like compositions. This guy would ink it and have it done on time, but he would cut out whole characters out of the background.
I heard about that.
Or he would take fully detailed like people in the background and turn them into just silhouettes.
I remember seeing like there's a video on that, like guys like the guys who ruined Kirby's art. Yeah.
Yeah. So like you got to be careful if you're gonna trust somebody else with inking and coloring your book. Like make sure there's oversight that on that, because you don't want somebody to come in and just bury all that work you did.
Well, and
imagine if someone took Batman Hush and all that gorgeous work that Jim Lee did and just buried it in this god awful colors and lens flares.
Well, that's how I first brought it up to you, because I mean, before we started working on Apollyon and Kolga, I hadn't read any comic from like the past 10, 20 years in a long time.
Right.
But when I started looking at it, I remember telling you, like, why does everything look like it's the color is like sunset?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what you're saying is like everything, it makes me squint to look at it. Everything looks like it's filmed or recorded at sunset, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all the simulated lighting, simulated flares. Everything has to have shine on it. Everything, and it's just it just ends up looking muddy and ugly, and like a Lisa Frank folder threw up all over it. It's not good coloring. And I think that's really the biggest issue is these particularly the bigger companies like Marvel and DC, they still would rather just put something out and get it out somewhat on time. So they'll hire some kid somewhere that really doesn't need to be working on a book on that level, but they can do it quick and they can put it out and they don't care whether it sells or not because they're betting on the next Disney Plus show.
Yeah, I didn't know. I'm not an artist. I didn't know how to articulate it. It's bothered me for a long time. Now, some of the stuff, especially in Uncanny X-Force, which I said, I like the run, but like especially like just even some of the inks are. That's what struck me. I think there's a different artist in the second volume than the first one. But look at Psylocke's face, or lack thereof. Mm-hmm. Like these are well-defined characters that Jim Lee himself, I think, even helped create, which was like Psylocke. But like in so many modern comics, like the faces just look like mush. Mm-hmm. It's like it could be anybody. Mm-hmm. And it's like, man, like look at this picture of Wolverine, and look at that. Is that Wolverine?
Yeah.
Who is that?
Like a hobo.
Who is that? And like I said, these guys are better artists than me. And a lot of things, and if I gotta keep complaining, because it doesn't stop with the art, like modern writing, even in this, which I like this, these characters don't act like themselves. They just kind of act like they only exist within that panel. They don't have a character outside of
Mm-hmm.
how they're immediately reacting. And some of that does have to do with the lack of internal dialogue that exists, which I wasn't a huge fan of internal dialogue in comics ever. I hadn't against it, but when it kind of phased out, I was fine with it. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you need something like that.
I think it works well as long as it's not relied on too heavily.
Yeah,
Like I love it when Frank Miller does it.
yeah. Well, in this story, so far, the first two volumes, the only one you get really is Phantomex. And so you get more involved in his head, so you understand him better than the other characters. And so it
Mm.
just kind of feels like it feels like everyone else is in the dark, and it shouldn't feel like that.
It shouldn't.
Yeah. So
Well, let me real quick because I don't want to just complain.
yeah.
I've bragged on Once and Future before.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to show, and it's not. I don't know how well it's going to show up on here.
I'll pull it up over here. Just some of the stuff.
But like when you look at a book like Once and Future, you can do awesome like saturated color. You can have those brilliant colors and things
Mm-hmm.
without burying excellent art under.
Yeah.
In,
Yeah.
in
I'm
like
pulling up a lot of it right now.
yeah,
Yeah.
this book is the best example in modern comics for me of how you can take really like
Yeah.
oversaturated,
Vibrant art.
vibrant, yeah, very vibrant colors and do them in a way that does not lose all your details and all your awesome line work and here again this is somebody who's none of these pages are like you don't look at any of these pages and feel like they're just like
Yeah.
stuck in panels. Like it's awesome artwork. So
Well,
there is still really incredible stuff out there.
Seven to Eternity was like that.
Yeah, Seven to Eternity has fantastic artwork. Anything Sean Murphy does, even if the story's not that great, like that most recent, the Beyond the White Knight wasn't a great story, but the art
Yeah.
was still really good.
Yeah, Seven to
Yeah,
Eternity was one for me that like they did those colors really well.
Yeah, it's gorgeous, gorgeous. So there is really good artwork out there still, but there's still so much of this overly computerized stuff that just bogs down. And sometimes maybe they're doing it because maybe some of this art just there isn't good pencils and ink under that, and so we got to hide it. Like
Sure.
I don't know, that might be part of it, but I think that's one of the biggest lessons I'm going to take with me into Kolga when I start really working on Kolga is because Kolga is going to have a lot of vibrant color, but I don't want to bury the ink in all that. Like I don't want to lose the line work.
Well, it's funny because I watched it today, but that's what kind of blew my mind because I'd seen it before, but I didn't remember it. But Angel's Egg is
God.
like that, where
Such a good anime.
it will use like very pale and dreary colors, and at the same time have these super vibrant ones, which I'll pull up. I'll show people over here. It had a nice combination of the two.
That's a gorgeous film. I don't necessarily know what it means,
Yeah.
but it's a gorgeous film. It would probably be a better view if you're like on LSD, but
And it's a simple story. She has the. I'm not gonna go into it, but yeah, like there's a lot that you're like it just doesn't answer any questions.
yeah, it doesn't.
But
It's more about the experience aesthetically than anything else.
yeah, which is fine. It seemed like an artist's fun project that he made. Which hey, you make it that good, you can make anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Sign me up.
yeah, like I'm not here to complain. It just I don't know how to articulate, and it just bothers me. And like when something bothers me, it makes me want to do it better and fix it. And I just couldn't stand. Like I said, I love both of those characters so much, particularly Archangel, and his design is great. It's just so boring. Like, why would you even why would you have them fight in a hotel room? Unless it was.
Why would you waste a frame of Archangel on knocking a lamp off off of a counter.
with his hand instead of his wings. And yeah, stuff like that. It's like, dude, if you have a huge winged figure, like it's literally the angel of death, you should be like Jim Lee, and in every picture he should be intimidating. And in every picture of Wolverine, he should be this rascal, Mongol looking thing that is always ready to go, like a rabid mongrel.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim Lee particularly mastered that knee curve whenever Wolverine is coming straight forward. He really perfected getting those like the spikes coming out of the knee to look threatening and cool.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, but yeah, in that first picture, going back to it again, the bottom 3 panels where they're fighting and it's red and black. That's another thing, is that in the old comics, going back to, I'm talking about the first pictures again of Wolverine coming forward.
Mm-hmm.
The colors change, and it's vibrant, and it's a beautiful mix of colors. In the new one, the colors don't change.
Yeah,
nothing changes.
It's just samey.
Yeah,
and it's samey for 4, 5, 6, 7 pages in a row.
Yeah, the great thing because Claremont didn't write this one. I don't think. I could be wrong. Maybe he did, but guys like Claremont, I know he wrote X-Men 1 when it relaunched with Magneto on the cover and all that. He was
You're talking about
the famous one. It's Magneto. It's a double spread cover. It's got Cyclops. It's the most famous. It's the most sold X-Men cover ever. Claremont wrote a lot. He was very wordy. But
yeah, he was.
But even then, and maybe that's the whole point of it, is that Jim Lee in particular could make you not care that it had, like, especially if you're a kid, it had this walls of text, and he built it in such a way that you're just fascinated. You're looking at Jim Lee's Psylocke, basically.
Yeah. He was able to have an incredibly awesome page with a lot going on, and he could cover a lot of story in a small amount of time, whereas that scene that we looked at in the X-Force drug out something that could have been Jim Lee would have made that whole scene in like 1 or 2 panels.
Yep. That's another thing, the decompressed storytelling, which I'm fine with if it's something worth decompressing and getting into. If it's fighting in a hotel room, you know what you should have done?
And if it's knocking a lamp over with your hand.
What should have happened is how to get Wolverine close, and maybe this is me being a douchey writer. It should have had, as soon as Wolverine comes in, the wings, bam, hit him with the sharp thing. And he goes through another room, knocks him through. And then how he gets through at first is the next thing you see is like a mattress or a huge thing come flying from the other room at Angel. Angel has to shred it with his wings, and then Wolverine's there. And then both of those pages of dialogue could have been within like those 3 panels. You're right.
Yeah, I agree.
But Matt, I mean, just all you need is those wings ripping something apart, opening, and then there's the little hairy guy right in your face.
Yep.
I'm not gonna nitpick it to death, but anyway, on the screen right here, I have the black and white Angel Reborn. And forgive me, who's the artist again?
Joe Maduro.
All right, this is considerably better. You're right. I still think the lines are a little big.
Yeah,
especially on the wings, the outline.
Yeah, that's a personal style thing, but you can see how much the
better.
Colors.
Yeah, that could be a manga.
The colors bury that.
Yeah, that could be in a manga, maybe even an American manga. That could be a Japanese manga at a certain time. I got you.
It feels a lot like some of the Full Metal Alchemist.
You're
style.
right. Even the face does.
The hands.
The hands and
the
face
and the hands.
And
so,
that looks much better. You're right.
Art.
Yeah, you're right. That's giving me a new perspective on it.
When you throw all that computer oversaturated garbage on top of a decent, it doesn't have to be great, but decent art, it's going to look muddy and garbage.
And let me pull up for the viewers the comparison between the two. Maybe I lost it. Oh, I got it here. Sorry, guys. I'll just have that on there while we're talking so everybody can appreciate it. Like, I don't mind being wrong. I'd love to be able to appreciate more art. I remember, I hated that first cover. I hated that cover so bad as a kid.
I didn't like it during his run on X-Men. I didn't like it when Wolverine had lost his nose.
Yeah, and Psylocke,
He had
her
like
face was kind of weird.
de-evolved or whatever, and had no nose, and he
Yeah,
looked kind of like a Ninja Turtle for a while.
that is a considerable difference. You're right.
Yep.
Yep.
And I think, if we want to talk about artists during that era that managed not to lose that, in fact, I'm gonna give you another really good example of the modern colors versus the old. But Dale Keown, who worked on the Hulk in the '90s during the Professor Hulk era, where they
Is
had
that the
merged the
same
Hulk into
guy?
one
Hold on.
personality, Dale Keown,
Hold on. Is that the same
and
dude? Give me a second.
he also did Pitt.
That's the same dude, I think. If it is, I'm gonna laugh so hard that I just ripped this guy's stuff. That's the. Oh, maybe he just did the variant cover that was good. Okay, I wasn't trying to be mean. The Reaper Destroyer, the cover that I showed that was like that's a good cover. That was Keon. Well, that explains
All
it.
right, so I'm gonna
Sorry. Okay, that makes sense now. Yeah, that
send
is that
you.
is the guy that did Pit, isn't it?
Yep. So I'm gonna send you a picture
That
of
explains it.
some of his work from the '90s.
Oh yeah.
So give me a minute. Let me see. There was a really good example. All right, so like here's like Hulk cover with Hulk and
Yeah.
Punisher. It's
That's a
fun. It's
that's a
big. It's
that's a cool
dynamic.
that's a cool style. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool style. He did a really great job with muscles.
The
Um,
faces were good.
yeah, he did. He understood how to make Hulk look like dope. He made his Hulks like massive, and that was always good.
Well, I know
Um,
Pitt was like a Hulk ripoff. I don't mean that
that
mean,
was
but
a
it was.
really cool one.
That's great. Yeah. That's a
Yeah,
great style.
great stuff. So like, there was there's a lot of really good covers he did back then. I loved that one where we had
Yeah,
like the
the
Savage Hulk
faces coming
tearing out
together.
between the Gray Hulk and Banner.
Yeah.
And then what they started putting out these essentials trade paperbacks, the big thick ones, and they took the original art from those covers and things and recolored them
Mm.
for the covers of these essentials.
Man, I saw
All right, so
the recolor of X Factor they did. The original run, I did not like it at all.
I had just shown you that one. Look how bad that looks
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, that's really bad. It's all
And
shiny.
it's the
Looks
same.
like looks
It's
like
the same
sunset.
pencils and ink. But
That's
look how
insane.
awful that looks.
Send me both of those so I can pull them up over here. Yeah, that's
You
a
know what?
drastic difference.
I said the same pencils and ink, but the reality is
Oh, is it not?
that's not even the same ink.
Is it
It's the same pencils, but it's not even the same ink. You can tell somebody re-inked that,
Oh,
and it looks awful. Yeah, let me send you
yeah.
the
Send me
original
both of
cover
those.
so that we can put it up
My
for
goodness.
posterity.
Sorry, I'm still looking at the Omega Red versus Wolverine covers, like the different ones, the different times they fought. My goodness, Jim Lee was good.
Oh
My
yeah,
goodness, he was good.
unbelievably good. So yeah, I'm gonna send those two so you can put them up side by side.
I should go back and recollect that line, like those first like 20 to 30 issues, just for Jim Lee's covers. Good night.
Can't tell if it's been re-inked or not, but the colors were
I
definitely
mean, heck, that's why
done.
I get the first 100 issues of Spawn just for McFarlane's art and Capullo's art. Because, good lord, every page of that first 100 issue run is a work of art.
All right, did both of those go through to you?
Yep, I got the old one, which looks fantastic. His faces are good, they're dynamic. Oh, God, and here's the new one. Yeah, that's bad, dude.
Why would you do it?
That's a dang shame.
Why would you even do it? Why would you take something that looked that good and have somebody redo it? I also want to find.
But like, what do you
is
call that though? Like, I know I'm not trying to harp on. I'm just super ignorant. What is that? it looks like sunset. Like I don't. Why is it always those kind of colors? Like is that hyperviolet? Like the
I don't.
red,
I don't. There's
orange?
not a. It's very warm.
Yeah,
I
it's.
don't know.
But it makes you squint. It makes your eyes go like this instead of opening up. Like the one on the left. I'm sorry, you can't see it. The old one relaxes my eyes,
Yep.
and the new one, like hurts.
Your soul. It hurts your soul.
How
Now I'm trying to find. He did one painting of the Hulk.
Now I'm like I said, I'm ignorant of this. How can you tell it was re-inked? I can tell it was recolored,
I don't.
obviously.
I actually don't think it was. I was looking a little closer.
Okay.
I think it's the same ink. I think it's just so buried in the
Yeah.
colors that it just looks darker and muddier than it actually was.
Well, you're right because on the new one, there's
I was
in
the
the right
bicep and stuff.
the right arm. There's a whole muscle.
Hmm.
There's a whole muscle in shadow that's not showing up on the forearm.
Yep.
Man, that is bad.
But see, that's how you really show the difference though for the modern colors versus
Yeah.
those classic colors. It's so ugly now.
Yeah.
It doesn't look anything. It doesn't look real. It doesn't look. I don't know, man. It's just hard to look at.
It's not pleasant or cool.
No,
So I don't know what to
it's
call
just
it.
it just looks muddy, and I don't know why you would do it.
That's just weird.
I'm trying to find one specific Dale Keown Hulk, and I can't find it to save my life.
Do it.
And it's
Do it
making me
now.
mad.
I'm upset.
There we go. I found it.
Yeah, send it to me.
So this is a painting of the Hulk that Dale Keown did for the Incredible Hulk game on the
Chuck-
Sega Genesis.
Chuck Mangione did.
Dude, this was like my favorite picture of the Hulk forever.
Oh man, that armored Xanatos figure came out. You can you can
sweet.
pre-order it. Get this though, it's not just the metal gargoyle face. It comes with a Xanatos head you can put on it too, so it's like him in the suit.
Oh, that's
Dude,
good.
it looks awesome. I'm pre-ordering that like as soon as we get off here.
Alright, so I sent you the one I'm talking about, the Sega Genesis
Yeah,
box art.
that looks like a Sega Genesis box art.
Look how cool the Hulk looks, though.
That. Oh, I've seen that.
Dude, he's so savage.
That's hold on. That's the one. Is that the one that came out right before the now you just blew my
the
mind.
first movie.
Is no. The X-Men game that they had that was like it was the arcade game.
I'm not sure.
I've seen that before. So give me the background on this one though.
Just that I loved it. I had several comments that was the back page of it, and I was like, oh, that's the best Hulk I've ever seen.
It's just blowing my mind because I know I've seen that. 1994. Yeah. I remember this one. Okay. Sorry, that was blowing my mind. I was like, I know I've seen that before.
That was a pretty fun Hulk game too. I remember my cousin had that game.
I'm seeing the screenshots of it now. I remember that. Okay, yeah, I know I've seen that before. I think was there a like a not Game Informer or whatever it was, like a magazine cover of that.
I'm sure there probably was.
Okay, I know I've seen that before, but yeah, that's cool.
But it was a really good like Hulk side scroller.
Yeah, I remember Adamantium Rage, the Wolverine game.
Oh yeah, dude.
It would like make you lose life like when you use the adamantium when you use your claws. Yeah. Here it is. You can't see it, but yeah, I've got it pulled up. It was a That's why it's so familiar to me. It was an ad in a game in a magazine. That's where I saw it. Okay, I remember seeing that, and it blew my mind as a kid. And then I remember like my buddy had it. Let's see if I can send this to you. Come on. There it goes. Yeah, see? Yeah, I remember seeing the bigger version of it. Yeah. That's really cool. I remember seeing that. I love the sickly green color.
Mm-hmm. Kind of yellowish green.
Yeah. I
But yeah,
remember that.
like not to drag this on for like
No, I don't
too
care.
long,
Yeah.
but you know, if you look at the difference between all those side by side comparisons, and like I could see somebody coming in and saying, well, I like that. That's fine. Like if you appreciate that art, that's fine. I don't know how you could argue that the colors are not better in the
Yeah, and the older ones.
old example. I don't know how you make that argument. I really don't.
Well, it's just it doesn't have to be that you have to love Jim Lee or McFarlane or those guys. It's just like, but you can't say that they weren't the top of the top at the
And that the
time.
industry
Yeah,
on the whole, the industry was creating better art then. Maybe the
yeah,
conditions weren't great for the people working for those companies,
and maybe the
but
writing wasn't
man,
great.
well, that too. But man, the art was so much better.
Yeah, like you don't have to like that kind of art because like
Yeah.
Frank Miller doesn't do that kind of art. But
He doesn't even do his own kind of art
he's not.
anymore.
Yeah. Now that guy he's got doing Ronin is fantastic.
Oh yeah, that,
Yeah,
that 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 dude's awesome. But yeah,
yeah.
that Wolverine that he
Oh
put out
yeah,
recently was
that was a
ugly.
garbage Wolverine.
I'm like, how did
He
he like
didn't
drew that while
care.
he was on the crapper
Yeah,
or
he
something?
didn't care. That's what it was. So, yeah, you don't have to like a certain art, but like there are some things that are aesthetically, objectively better, and
Yeah,
that's just something you have to admit. And it's like,
yeah.
hey, I just don't know how to articulate it, which is why I got you to do it better, because it's like I keep seeing this and it really bothers me, and like especially in the indie scene, it's like guys talk about how bad modern comics are, then don't create the same problem.
Yeah, stop making this garbage.
Yeah. And I'm just gonna call it sunset colors. I always see freaking
No, that
sunset
works fine to
colors.
me.
Which
That golden hour.
Gunslinger Spawn has that. That's what I
Yeah.
was looking for over here. Like Gunslinger Spawn. I don't know who's doing the art. I don't know if that's McFarlane or who's doing the colors, but I was not impressed by the colors in that.
Well,
Anyway,
that's the biggest thing is that it really does come down to like you could have a lot of these books probably look great when they turned in those pencil pages or the ink
yeah,
pages.
yeah.
They probably look pretty solid, and then somebody came and barfed a bunch of garbage colors
Well,
on top
I'm
of
gonna
them.
go on record and say that then. Like I'm gonna go on record and say that maybe I've been harsh on artists when it should have been the colorists, because I just
Mm-hmm.
didn't know and spoke out of ignorance. This is why I wanted you to clarify. So I'll start looking at that a little bit differently now. But what would be your advice then for guys? Like, how do you avoid that? Like, why do you think it's so prominent? You think it's a style at this point, and people just don't
No, I
know?
think it's just I think a lot of it is people that are trying to get into the business. They want so badly to work for Marvel or for DC or some one of these bigger companies, and you know you kind of have to sell your soul a little bit to do it.
You think it's quicker?
And once they get in there, you know those bigger companies don't want you to probably to sit down and do all the work yourself. They want you to turn in some pages, and then they can run it down that assembly line, and it's going to get phoned in by somebody that shouldn't be touching your book. My
Yeah.
thing is either do it yourself or find an artist that you can look at their art and see how good, you know, if they're a colorist, ask for examples, find examples of what they do and look for this stuff. Like, do they bury it in muddy colors? Do they so oversaturate it that it doesn't look real? Do they understand how to do light, or do they just throw these ridiculous sunset colors on it? Do they put a bunch of little Photoshop lens flares all over everything, or do they take their time to actually color light?
Yeah.
You know, and you know, if I'd honestly say the best way to avoid it is to color it yourself, and if you don't have the time or the
Well,
skills, find somebody that does and get them on board and make a team.
what's your advice for guys who in indie who are trying to do it themselves or are colorists and trying to be indie colorists then? Like, how do they
Find
overcome this?
find Facebook groups or art forums. Find people that are inkers that are putting up there. You'll find people all the time that'll put up, hey, this is the page that I've been working on. This is a drawing I'm looking at. And ask them, hey, can I take this ink that you did, can I color it and show you how it turns out?
God.
And you know, if you start posting pictures of, like, if you're a colorist and you start posting collaborations with artists that have at least a little bit of a following on social media, that are just, because there's a lot of people out there, guys and girls out there, that are very good at drawing. They're really good at drawing. They don't know how to color. They're scared of color.
Yeah.
There's a lot of artists that are terrified of color, and you know they're maybe really good at the ink part, and then that's all they're good at. Ask them, hey, can I color it?
Mm.
And show you the results. And if they like it, you start building a mutual, you know, working relationship with that artist. Maybe that you can work together, or at the very least, of
Yeah.
somebody else that is looking for a colorist is able to look and see you've
Yeah.
got a little bit of a portfolio going of stuff that you colored and that it looks good. Somebody will reach out to you and say, hey, can you work on my book?
One more thing. I'm not trying to turn this into an interview, but trying to actually get advice for people. As an art, because I see people do this kind of stuff. Like, as an artist, would it offend you if someone recolored something you've done? Because I mean, that seems like the best way to learn is if you're a colorist, you take something that maybe you don't like the color of and you recolor it.
I don't think it would.
Especially if it was better.
Well, yeah, if it was better, I would definitely be happy to say, wow, that's better. How about you do it for me from
Yeah.
now on? But also, I would say if you're going to do that, do something that really make a different take on it.
Yeah.
And, you know, do something bold and different, and don't just ape what they've done. If you're going to do that, that's a ballsy thing to do. Now, if you can pay off on it, then yeah, I think that's a good thing. You could do that.
Yeah.
Be prepared that not everybody's as chill as I am. I think you're better
Sure,
off finding
especially on
somebody
Twitter.
that's putting up their inks.
Excuse me, on X.
X gonna give it to you.
We just don't know what it is yet.
Trips to the gulag.
Do you have any
no,
any last advice then for artists and colorists?
Try some different things. Don't, like, I challenged myself because I do a lot of colors. I do a lot of colors digital, and I think that's fine. Although when I color digitally, I try to treat it a lot of the same way I would if I was coloring naturally. I try not to do a bunch of gradients and a bunch of lens flare type stuff. I try to keep it natural, but you know, don't lose touch with your physical media. Like, I still will pull out my markers, my Copic markers. I'll still pull out my watercolors, and I keep those skills honed, because you don't depend on just one way of doing it.
Yeah.
And mix it up. You know,
you think adding texture, even if you're doing digital, like using a pen instead of just autofill or auto gradient or something?
Oh yeah, I don't autofill anything. I color it all in just like if I was coloring it in on a paper. Like, I treat it just like I would if I was coloring with a marker. I want brush strokes. I want pen strokes. Yeah.
Cool. All right. You got anything else you want to add to this other than our promos we're about to do?
No, just like and subscribe. Follow us on here. If you haven't done it yet, go to the Godfo Universe. Was it godfouniverse.com?
Mm-hmm.
Is our website. Get on the mailing list.
Yeah, we've got a lot of writing and comics, and God, we got so much coming out for you. We're literally trying to turn this into
I know
a
we've been
whole
saying that for a while now, but we really do mean it.
Yeah, we're bringing you more than anybody else will.
Yep.
Easily. And that's the standard we're going to set and keep. We're not in the... Here's the thing. We're doing comics. We're talking about comics a lot. We're not here to make comics. We're here to make a universe art of every type of media. That will always include comics, but we are not limited to comics. We're not going to spend a year with an Indiegogo trying to sell you like the first issue or the first volume of something. And that's what so many people do. And to me, that's weak.
Yeah.
We're not relying on Indiegogo to get this stuff done. It's going to get done whether it gets funded or not, because you can just buy it later because we know our stuff is evergreen good. Anyway, so come join us, because you're going to get way more cooler, better stuff than you will from than indie or mainstream comics will give you.
Yep. Yep. And if you're a really good colorist, look us up and show us your work, and maybe we find something for you to do.
Yep. Until next time, fellas. Peace.